20th Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee meeting. We're a little off schedule on time, but not too far. So if we could get the roll call, please.
Mr. Appel,
Here.
Dr. Armstrong, Mr. Birkin, Mr. Castile, Ms. Champagne, Dr. Clark, Mr. Harris, Mr. Hollis, not present, Ms. Holloway, Ms. Mallory, Mr. Morris, Mr. Grabert, not present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's start with the consent agenda.
Your consent agenda is ready for approval, adding items 4.1 and 5.2 through 5.6.
Do we have a motion? Mr. Castillo makes a motion. Mr. Harris seconds. Do we have any objection? No cards. Okay. Any objection to the motion? No objection heard. The motion carries.
Your first item is on page 28, item 3.1, consideration of an update report regarding literacy key endeavors. The recommendation is to receive.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Mr. Castillo and Mr. Harris seconds.
So, Mr. Appel, as Dr. Chasson makes her way to the table, a few comments here. So, we're really thankful to be able to work with this new Bessie to establish a set of priorities that we believe are absolutely the right priorities moving over the next 3.5 years of this term. We're excited to be doing that work, and what we have done as a team since that point is we have aligned a particular Bessie meeting to each of those priorities so that we can come forward and simply share an update with the board on each of those priorities at a Bessie meeting across the span of every year. What certainly willing to share with you all today is that today's presentation is the first that we have done, and so beyond this presentation, welcome any feedback on format of the presentation, information you would like to see as we talk about other priorities and key performance indicators. So just know beyond today, we're more than willing to have additional conversations of what this should look like as we bring valuable information to the board. But one thing is true, and that is among many things, and that is that Louisiana's growth around literacy policy has received not just attention in our state, but nationally. And so we have a lot of energy in our schools around this, and it's based on policy decisions that this board has made, as well as our state legislature. And so we're really excited about the literacy work that's based on the science of reading, and we look forward to a presentation with a number of different data points from Dr. Chasson this morning. So, Dr. Chasson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Frumley. Good morning, Jenna Chasson, Department of Education, and today I'm happy to bring you all some updates on our literacy improvement work. So I'll begin with our pillars, and our pillars for our comprehensive Louisiana literacy strategy really center around first setting and communicating goals from the student level all the way up to here at the state level, setting those clear goals. It also includes explicit literacy interventions and extensions, knowing the importance of that core instruction, but also recognizing that many of our students need access to resources and support both below and above grade level at times. It includes strong ongoing professional learning for our educators and our leaders. And of course, it recognizes the crucial role that our families play in supporting students in their literacy journey. And so I'll begin first with our 2028 literacy goal, which is set on NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And so we really wanted to ground our literacy improvement plan in data so that we can best understand the impact of our robust literacy improvement activities. So we wanted to set a clear, long-term, quantifiable goal. We looked towards a strong national indicator to do this. And so we looked at NAEP, and our goal is that by 2028, Louisiana's fourth grade NAEP results will increase by 10 points in scale score in comparison to the 2019 results. And this would place Louisiana above the national average in fourth grade reading performance. And if rankings would remain steady, this would place us in the 20s in ranking. To set a little context about the history of this goal, because this is one that I have shown for quite some time now, we set this goal back in 2021, really at the onset of our literacy improvement work. And we based the goal on the 2019 NAEP data, so we used a baseline that's actually prior to COVID. This goal was really set by examining the work in Mississippi that happened beginning in 2013, and it parallels the growth that Mississippi saw in their NAEP results over the course of 7 years as they implemented their comprehensive literacy policy. We know that their 7 years from 2013 onwards did not include COVID, so we knew by setting this 10-point goal, we were actually being more ambitious than the growth that was achieved by Mississippi. In continuing with goal setting and increasing student outcomes, I would like to take a moment to share our new literacy key performance indicators that are based on student outcomes. The KPIs will be measured using 2028 assessment data. These KPIs are specifically focused on 3rd and 8th grade student performance, really the onset of our student literacy journey and their first year in taking our state LEAP assessment, and then 8th grade as we show readiness for high school. After a thorough analysis of historical data, we decided on 5% as the goal for 2028, a 5% increase. The first KPI focuses on growing the overall proficiency level of 3rd grade students by at least 5%, and the second KPI expects the same 5% growth for 8th grade students by 2028. So in looking and examining the historical data, we recognized that this growth would allow our state to attain the highest achievement level in Louisiana's history and mark significant, incremental, sustained growth. The next slide is a look at our latest LEAP data. So this shows the overall combined grades 3rd through 8th English language arts mastery plus rate. So these would be our percentage of students who are proficient or above, scoring mastery and advanced. And this slide shows the progress in 3rd through 8th grade English language arts from 2021 to 2024. So you notice that incremental uptick over time. And this next slide breaks down into the 2 grade levels that we've set key performance indicators around, that 3rd and 8th grade snapshot. So this is a look over the last several years of both of those grade levels. You can see that 3rd grade saw an uptick from 43% to 45% between 2023 and 2024. And you see a slight decline from 2023 to 2024 in 8th grade. And although, of course, we're not pleased with any decline ever, I would note, we have been always really interested in cohort data, but I think cohort data is more important now than ever since COVID. All of our students in different grade levels were at a different point in time when COVID occurred, obviously, and it has left different significant deficits and impact on their learning progression. Although we closed school in the 4th 9 weeks of 2020, I'll oftentimes say that it was actually the following school year that I think impeded student learning the most. I think that 4th 9 weeks may have been recoverable. The next school year, with so many teachers and students in and out of school throughout the entirety of that year, I think really had the largest impact on student learning and the deficits that we now see. And so I think it's always really important to look at cohort data. So a reminder, when we look at this slide, we're looking at different students. You're looking at a different 3rd grade class each year. You're looking at a different 8th grade class each year. So I'll just note that although the 8th graders of 2023 were at a 46% mastery plus, And the eighth graders of 2024 were at a 45% Mastery Plus. The eighth graders of this year actually improved from their seventh grade year. So there was progress from the seventh graders of last year to then become the eighth graders of this year. And that's one of the reasons I think it's so important for us to always recognize and take a look at cohort data as well, to see cohorts growing or declining from one year to the next. And so the next slide is a totally different data point. This is our new statewide Louisiana literacy screener data. So this is for our kindergarten through third grade students who are now taking this screener 3 times per year at the beginning of the year. You see BOY. They take it again as progress monitoring at middle of year, MOY, and then they take again EOY at the end of year. And this slide shows our on or above rates, so students who are on grade level for reading and above grade level for reading. I'm happy to share that kindergarten to third grade overall increased 10% from the fall to the spring of last year, but you see obviously the most significant gains were in kindergarten and first grade. Our kindergarten and first grade students obviously experienced fewer COVID-related gaps in learning and have most fully benefited from all of the work that we've done in our earliest grade levels in literacy improvement policies and implementation. And so we see, even though our kindergarten students came in with less than 30% of them ready for kindergarten and ready to access that kindergarten learning, there was a large uptick. There was a lot of work done by our kindergarten teachers last year. And so then 60% of our kindergartners left that grade level ready for first grade. And so I also want to address second and third grade and some of the lack of movement there, because we see such great gains in kindergarten and first grade and not the same in second and third grade. And I'll share a little bit on the next slide about cut scores and what that means. But I would also just want to add that second and third grade, when we think about those students, where they were throughout the pandemic, they were 3 and 4 years old. And so obviously their early language was inhibited during that time. They entered school at a lower level, and they have more deficits than those kindergarten and first grade students that we now see. And I'll show in a few slides, what can be done and what is being done around student learning deficits, especially in reading. But I oftentimes will compare it to a piece of Swiss cheese. And so there are these holes, there are these gaps in their learning that have to be filled in order for them to progress in their reading. And I think that's what we're seeing here in second and third grade when we think about those particular cohorts of students being 3 and 4 years old. This next slide shows our DIBELS, which is the literacy screener that we use now as a state, benchmark cut scores. So as students are assessed on that literacy screener 3 times throughout the year, the cut scores that determine proficiency increase for each benchmark. So I thought this was important to show how really the ante is upped over time. What students are expected to be able to do and what they are expected to be able to read increases over the course of the school year. And so in order to stay proficient or stay above proficient, a student has to progress throughout that school year. So you can see here, this is just a sample of some of the measures to show how the score increases over the year. And I'll point out third grade here. While a student only needs to read 73 words per minute at the beginning of the year to be considered proficient on oral word fluency, that same child needs to read 105 words per minute by the middle of the year and 114 words per minute at the end of the year in order to be considered proficient. So when we see students maintain proficiency, it means that they're still growing in order to make that progress. So the next few slides will show some screenshots from the new literacy screener system that we now have available statewide for kindergarten through third grade. And this is our first full year of implementation of our new literacy screener. And I think it just has some amazing tools within it that I wanted to make sure to demonstrate here today. This fits in really nicely with our new Accelerate tutoring model based on Act 771 with school day embedded tutoring. And this is a wonderful resource for our kindergarten through third grade teachers to now all be able to access to administer that really specific individualized tutoring support. This slide is from a teacher's viewpoint within what's called the M-Class system, which is where the DIBEL scores are housed. It's an online portal where the data is input and teachers can examine the data to inform next steps for instruction. Students who fall below proficiency are required to have an individual academic support plan that fits in with their tutoring and the extra support that they receive. And this outlines which skills need to be intervened. And the M-Class portal will give that information to the teacher. So they are not having to go outside of this to figure out what a student needs and pulling, resources from all sorts of different places to try to meet the needs of the student. So it will place students in groups. We see here on this slide 2 students. We have Samir and Aiden. And we can see that Samir, when we click on his name, he is at the well below level, which is the lowest level of DIBELS. And we see that he needs to be intervened in phonemic awareness. And it tells me as a teacher specifically where. It shows his information. He can segment some word parts, which means if we give him the word cat, Samir could say k-at, but he's able to segment those letter sound, but he's not able to segment into all 3 letter sounds, first, middle, and last. So Samir would struggle with going k-at. And we know that being able to segment letter sounds is a cornerstone of learning how to sound out words and then ultimately to read fluently. So it tells us that he needs to go into the phonemic awareness group. And what M-Class will do is tell you where your entry point is with that student, which is the simplest skill that they have mastered, and it'll tell you where the deficit occurs so that you know exactly where to intervene. This is another teacher view slide, and it has created my groups. It tells me that James, Alice, and Ava should be placed in a group together because they have a common deficit, a common need. And it's giving me information about that group. So you can see these 3 students need to work on fluency using words that have simple patterns. And it provides me as the teacher information on what my students can do and what they need to work on. And if I click on that bottom line that says See Activities, it pulls up hundreds of intervention activities that can be used by the teacher during small group instruction during that tutoring time. This is just one little snapshot of the different activities that are provided for teachers to choose from. So back here to our friend Samir, our first grader, who's falling well below. You can see here a little breakdown of what he scored at the beginning of the year, and we see the 2 skills that he's working on. He's working in letter sounds, and he's working on decoding. And so throughout interventions, we can see that he's being progress monitored. You see where it says last 3 p.m. scores in that column. Those are his last 3 progress monitoring checks on his interventions. So I, as a teacher, have administered this progress monitoring to check in and see how Samir is performing after he gets some of these doses of interventions during tutoring time. And so it shows me the progress that he is making. And so this really demonstrates on that top line that he is making progress. I see his scores increase in letter sounds, but they're not increasing in decoding. So this tells me as the teacher that the intervention is not working for decoding, and so it needs to be adjusted, and it will give me, from this point, some recommendations of things to consider. there are some decisions to be made about Samir and his progress. We might need to shift the frequency of the interventions. We may need to shift the group size. Maybe Samir is in a bit of a larger group and he needs something more individualized. Maybe we need to take a look at the activities being used for intervention with Samir. But it's giving me very specific data, progress monitoring, recommendations, and activities to complete with Samir that specifically address his individual needs. So as powerful as we know our new screener with progress monitoring interventions will be, we also know that we have other important pieces of policy in place that I would like to address. But I do believe the launch this year, the full launch from the beginning of the year of the use of DIBELS 8, the use of the M-Class platform, this amazing information for teachers, for tutors, interventionists, leaders to be able to use at their fingertips is going to be a huge game changer for instruction in our state in kindergarten through third grade reading. And I'm very excited about the impact that it will have in student learning. But as powerful as we know that is going to be, we know that there are other important levers in our comprehensive literacy plan. And one missing component that will go into effect this year is Act 422 of the 2023 legislative session, which is also known as the Third Grade Promotion Act. And so this does go into effect this year, so I wanted to highlight that here because it's also something new that is occurring, that we've had a lot of communication with our school systems around, and it does prohibit the promotion to the fourth grade of students who are reading in that well below category, just like our friend Samir. And so when those reading deficiencies have not been remediated by the end of third grade, that student would be perhaps retained based on whether or not they qualify for what's outlined in the bill as a good cause exemption. We know that whether that child is promoted to the fourth grade from a good cause exemption or if they're retained in the third grade for a second year, they do have a multitude of things that need to be done to address the deficits, things like daily targeted small group intervention, before and after school literacy intervention, at-home literacy programs, and of course, parent reporting and parent-guided home activities. The next policy I wanted to report out on today is Act 108 of the 2021 session. And I think for us, this is just one of the biggest pieces of legislation that happened early on in our literacy improvement work. And Act 108 requires the training of our kindergarten through third grade teachers and leaders. And this began back in the 2020-2021 school year, where we first piloted several programs. And so we used that feedback from the pilot to inform a statewide scalable model of this training. And we chose 4 vendors through a request for application process, and school systems were able to choose a provider. They've then had the last several years to choose a provider and provide this training that is required to their kindergarten through third grade teachers. We have been working the last few years on our own Louisiana version in a partnership with Louisiana Tech University, using state and national experts to design our own modules, and we'll have that available this fall. We used ESSER funding for that, some of our stimulus funding, knowing that over time we wanted to be able to sustain this training for new teachers. We also embedded this training within teacher preparation coursework so that teachers exiting our teacher preparation programs in Louisiana will have the necessary information and skills as they enter our classrooms. You all have in your backup documents a fuller report on the Act 108 statewide completion rates, but overall we are sitting right under 72% completed as a state. And I will note here that we do have several larger school systems, as you can see, who are at a lower rate of completion. And you can see as you look from system to system how that is decreasing the overall state average. And these are systems that we have and will continue to reach out to and support and work with over this year to make sure that the next time this is reported out, which is the end of every school year when they report to us their completion rates, that we see a much higher number than 72%. But getting that information at the end of every school year is very helpful to us because we now know where to target that support so that we can ensure that that rate grows over time. And so I just wanted to recognize our systems that are at 100% completion. I believe our largest system on this slide would be Rapides. We do have several smaller school systems, and we do have some of our charters represented here, but congratulations to those who hit that 100% completion rate. Also wanted to note in your data set that you have on the completion rate that's broken down, and we have a little asterisk there noting it, that there was one vendor whose training is designed to be a 2-year program. And so if you see some lower rates of completion, if they have an asterisk, they're using a program that's designed to be a 2-year program, so it may be taking them just a little longer, and I would expect some of those to increase this year as they finish their 2-year program. So ongoing professional growth beyond Act 108 training, I think it has been super important for us as a state as we think about, what happens after the Act 108 required training. Teachers are now empowered with this science of reading training, and the next step is to bring it into their classrooms to learn how do I use it with my literacy screener that's based on the science of reading. How do I bring it into my daily classroom tutoring groups? How do I bring it into my whole class instruction? And so our literacy division here at the Department of Education has worked tirelessly to provide that ongoing training and support to our teachers, to our leaders. And so we had over 500 educators just this past summer join us on our annual summer literacy tour as our literacy team traveled the state and engaged with educators all around on how to implement high-quality core instruction, how to internalize lessons, and most importantly, how to meet the needs of all of our learners. And so I think a next really important piece of our literacy strategy is the tutoring work that I've talked a little bit about so far as I showed off that M-Class platform. I've presented before and talked about our Steve Carter tutoring program, which I think is an important and valuable piece of legislation and program available. But we know that that's really supporting a small number of our students with that after-school and summer tutoring, which is in the form of a family voucher where a family can apply through a portal. And if their student is eligible, if they are below proficient, then they are able to access that tutoring. But we also have Act 771 that passed during this last legislative session with a $30 million appropriation, which is very exciting because this provides for school day embedded tutoring. And we know that research has found that when tutoring is provided at a high dosage and with certain features in place, it leads to increased learning for students. And what's really included in Act 771 are exactly the designs of what research tells us works best for our students. So we've been very excited this summer to roll out our Accelerate High Dosage Tutoring Program as a result of Act 771. And it really focuses on students in kindergarten through grade 5 who are below proficient. And it requires that those students are either placed in a class taught by a teacher who has been found to be highly effective by our evaluation system. And if that is not occurring, then high dosage tutoring needs to be offered to those students. The bill really outlines who can be qualified to be a tutor, which students need to be serviced, how those services need to take place. And at this point in the implementation, we have informed our school systems of their allocation amounts of that $30 million based on a projection of their student need. And they are hard at work on their plans that they are submitting to us right now through our online e-grant management system. And all of their plans are due by September 15th, at which point, when their plan is ultimately approved, after, if need be, it goes through some rounds of feedback, we will remit those payments to appropriate out that $30 million of funding once they have that approved plan. So we've been hard at work providing guidance, resources, individualized support to our school systems as they work on those accelerate high-dosage tutoring plans over the last several months and supporting them with their implementation as we head into this school year. So that's been very exciting work from my team and I really look forward to the impact that that tutoring work is going to have this school year. I also wanted to provide an update on Steve Carter. We did have new legislation. The Steve Carter Education Program is several years old now, but previously it focused on kindergarten through 5th grade literacy. And Act 649 of this past session expanded policy to now include kindergarten through 12th grade in both literacy and math. And the previous legislation provided for $1,000 of tutoring funding that we were able to use our ESSER dollars, our stimulus funding for. And this past year, we were actually able to secure a state appropriation to give $1,500 per student per school year, kindergarten through 12th grade literacy and math, who are eligible, which is any student who is found to be below proficient in LEAP or in those early grade screeners. And so finally, you can see that this is years of work in the making and lots of different data points collected. Just wanted to share a little bit about what is to come because we know there is still so much work to do. We're excited by the progress that we've made in student outcomes, but we know there is such a long road still to go. And so we'll continue to provide support to our school systems this year. And we'll give differentiated support for our school systems based on their data. So based on what we're seeing, whether it's in their required training data, in their screener results, in their LEAP results, we have a plan to give differentiated support to school systems. We've also done a lot of work around our students with dyslexia, and we'll continue doing that. We're offering dyslexia practitioner training for more cohorts so that we have more trained dyslexia practitioners. This was a need that we recognized a few years ago that we're trying to fill by having more trained and qualified dyslexia practitioners around the state. We are also working closely between our special education team, diverse learners team, and our literacy team to create really strong guidance for our students with disabilities. We are going to continue providing training and professional learning. We'll also release our Louisiana Science and Art of Teaching Reading course to satisfy Act 108 and have our own Louisiana training. And we'll continue collaborating and bringing our districts together to provide that differentiated support, as well as releasing more family resources. We have a plethora of family resources available on our website that we're always trying to message and communicate out, and we will continue to produce more family resources and support our schools and systems in outreach to their families. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Since we've talked last, you and I've got some questions because had a chance to look through the data better. First of all, on the NAEP data, my understanding is that includes different classes of students, not just public school students, and not all public school students. So how valid is NAEP state-to-state comparisons because of the nature of the data set?
Yeah, I'll ask Thomas to come up and share a little bit about NAEP.
Happy to help. So the NAEP data that you're looking at is public school NAEP data.
Oh, okay.
And the national data that we compare to is also public school data.
Okay, so it's narrow.
That's right. It is a narrow set of schools and students. The NCES, National Center for Education Statistics, pulls a sample of schools in every single state. The schools they pick are the schools that have to be in the sample. They do that in order to make sure that it is a valid, reliable sample from state to state. So they've
So
been doing
we're
it.
apples to apples with other states. That
That's
was
right.
my question about name. On page 30, we talk about the target. Let me find it. Bear with me one second. The target for the KPIs is a growth by 2028 of 50%. And you elaborated on why that number, it was a historic number, basically, I believe. But my question is, would we expect more growth beyond that in going forward as a result of the implementation of the reading literacy programs that we were putting in?
Yeah, I would say absolutely beyond 2028. You know, we were able to do just a really thorough analysis of LEAP over the years and look at growth on LEAP. And that 5% will put us at a target beyond where we have ever been as a state.
Right. That's what I understood.
Which is why we decided on that 5%. It actually, you know, outpaces ourselves. And so I do believe after 2028, as we get closer to that time, we'll be able to obviously set some new goals. And I would hope to beat this target. But I definitely think as we get closer to that time, we'll be looking further outwards. And I mean, we can see here with our kindergarten and first grade data, I can't wait for these kindergarten and first grade cohorts to be at the third and fourth grade level taking our state assessment, taking LEAP. I think we'll see some much better results with these students who have really benefited from all of the literacy improvement work.
Yeah,
that's
because
been done.
you have two impactful events here. You have the COVID issue, which will work its way through the system over time. And you also have the implementation of these reading policies, I'll call them. So you have two big issues that hopefully at the end of the day, we would see significant growth as a result of, as we kind of wash out COVID and then kids moving forward.
Mr. Appel, one
Please.
comment there too. You know, I think we have, as a team, we have been concerned about last year's 4th and 8th graders for some time, because last year's 8th graders that reflect here were basically 4th graders when their school year got closed. And so I think both you, Mr. Appel, and Dr. Chasson have made really good points around these cohorts aren't even. You know, there's a bit of unevenness around the amount of instruction and type of instruction that they've received over the last few years. So I think you guys both, in separate conversations with me, have pointed that out, which I think is also important to note. And the other thing I think is important to note is just a reminder that whenever we say proficiency in Louisiana, we're talking about mastery of content. So we're not talking about basic levels of understanding. When we say proficiency, it's mastery of content or above.
Okay. On the Dibbles data, oh, I'm sorry. Okay. On the Dibbles data, this really doesn't need much comment, but I note less than 30% are ready for kindergarten. And yet, some other statistics that I've heard recently was that we're faced with an ever-growing number of students that come from a poverty situation, something like 70-something%, I believe. And I would assume that that is a direct correlation to the less than 30% that are ready for kindergarten. Is that a fair statement, do you think?
Yes, and I'll just note there, Mr. Appel, that we had less than 30% of our kindergarten students entering ready. Look at the amazing growth that they experienced. So
Right,
imagine
I
if they
saw
were
that.
coming to us at a higher rate.
Right.
If we had more students ready to access kindergarten skills, imagine what that end of year would look like.
Do you know by any chance, and kind of off the cuff, but do you know how we stack up against other, let's say, southern states as far as being kindergarten ready percentages? Are we any different from the typical state, or are we kind of in line with averages like that?
That's something I'd have to get to.
You don't know? Okay.
Off the top of my head.
A couple more things. When we get the data, I see your reporting methodology for the teachers, and I think that's great. I think for Bessie's purposes, and I don't want to get in great detail today, but I do want to talk to you some more about it. We need to work together to develop a management reporting model, I'll call it, and one that involves not only the teacher, the individual student, but also the school-wide data, district-wide data, and system-wide data for us. So that's just a comment. And then the last thing I had, and then we'll open it up for other folks, is Act 108. I'm very disturbed by some of these school districts that haven't taken advantage of what's basically free teaching, free education for their teachers. And we need to talk about that some more. Is it not true that that legislation, Act 108, had a time frame where it was supposed to be completed by the end of this year?
Yes, they should have completed by now.
And to your knowledge, other than those that had two-year contracts, is there any particular reason or a general category of reasons why you don't think they did complete or would complete?
No.
Okay, so by January 1st, we should be able to get a report that says 100% of all schools and districts are up to speed, theoretically.
Yeah, no, they should have been done entering this school year. When I say year, I mean.
Oh, you're talking about school year. I was thinking it was calendar year.
Yes, no, they should be completed by the beginning of
So
this
they've
school
already in violation of the requirement of the law. Okay.
Which is why I think this, and why we wanted to provide to you all today and provide publicly this report that's back up today that's shown by school system.
Well, that's even more disturbing then. Thank you. Does anybody else on the board? Mr. Castillo?
Again, thank you, Dr. Chasson. Let's go back to page 32, slide 8. Just the Dibbles conversation. I had a teacher constituent reach out this weekend and express great concerns about Dibbles as an assessment tool. And I asked her if she had any alternative recommendations, and she didn't, but just expressed concerns about Dibbles. I had not heard any concerns before that. Any thoughts on the reliability of Dibbles as an assessment tool, and are there other alternatives out there to consider?
There are several alternatives. I will say that if you remember, Mr. Castillo, we went through a laborious and very lengthy RFP process, and ultimately Dibbles, Amplify is actually the vendor, was awarded that contract because of their work nationally and their validity and reliability in the assessment. They were ultimately awarded because they were able to prove that to the RFP committee.
Well, I wanted to the extent that that constituent teacher may be listening, good to hear some of the feedback. Then the other question was
Mr.
on,
Castillo, if I may
yes,
to that
sure.
point too,
Okay.
I know that our team has most recently had additional conversations around that very topic with some of the experts on that space. We're happy beyond today also to have a follow-up with you around that particular concern, and so you can ask, more freely some of the questions you may have.
Yeah, fair enough, thank you. And then on Act 422, you referenced the exemptions for good cause with respect to third grade promotion. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what those exemptions or examples of good cause might be?
Yeah, I don't have the entire list in front of me. There is a list, however, outlined in Act 422. I know it does include our students with disabilities, so students who may have an IEP, students with dyslexia are exempt, students who have already been retained. And so there is a list that could cause what's called a good cause exemption. It is a very similar, if not the same list that Mississippi used when they enacted this same legislation.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Birkin?
Dr. Chasson, with regards to the 30 million high dosage tutoring, how is that divvied up between the districts? Do they apply? Is it based on number of students per district? How does that get out to the districts and then therefore to the schools?
Yes, we worked to create a funding formula based on number of eligible students projected per school system. They do have to apply, not for a particular amount, because we use that funding formula to determine the amount per eligible students. but they do have to apply. They have to turn in that tutoring plan to us by September 15th. And then we will have a review and approval process for them to then be remitted the funds.
And so the school districts obviously were apprised of that, of how to do that and all, yes?
Yes,
So
we
the
launched
Steve-
that back in June.
Okay, so the Steve Carter says here, families will apply through a portal. How do families know?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for the last several years, we have really worked with our school systems and our schools. We have done some of our own work with outreach using the media to really let families know about the program and then encourage them to use it. We've really encouraged schools to send home, maybe it's with a report card, maybe it's with their DIBELS reporting, a letter that we've given to them determining, showing eligibility and letting parents know the steps that they can take to log into the online portal. It's a very simple portal to use. They log on, they use their child's ID number that the school supplies to them on this form, and they then can put in their zip code and see what providers are available in their area, and then they can choose the provider of their choice to use for the tutoring services. And so we've been working this summer since the new legislation on Steve Carter to make tutoring vendors available who are beyond K-5 literacy. So we've gone all the way K-12 math and literacy in alignment with the new legislation. And we were able to open to that expanded group on August 1st.
Mr. Birkin, too, just FYI, I had someone call me this morning, a parent, and say, actually, they were referencing St. Tammany, and they shared, I just got my letter yesterday that my child qualifies for the Steve Carter program in math. And so they were excited to get that notification so quickly. The other thing I wanted to point out here, too, is that we have a rolling request for applications for tutors. So we don't just have like one time during the year where anyone who might want to participate as a tutor can apply. We've moved that essentially to a rolling process where if you ever know of a vendor or if a group of individuals want to become a vendor, they can apply through that process at any point in time. And if they meet the requirements, they pass the checks, et cetera, they get placed on that list so that they can be a service provider.
So to piggyback on those discussions, if we have $30 million and we're not using it all, what are we going to do with the surplus?
So there will be,
Is that just before Dr.
Yeah.
Chasson gets in, is that an estimate that we won't use it all? Because this is new money that is being appropriated now to school systems as their tutoring plans are approved. So we fully believe that the $30 million over the course of this year will be expended.
Okay, that
Yeah.
would be wonderful.
That's right, yeah. Now, we had previously on Steve Carter set forth a set of ESSER dollars. We had no idea how much it would be utilized, so we set forth an amount of money, and all of that was not utilized. And so that's now the reason why the request for Steve Carter in this last budget was only $5 million, because we looked at what was utilized in like K-5 reading, and then looked at if we expanded that to math, and then also did K-12 instead of just K-5. And then we went up to $1,500 of a voucher, what we anticipated that cost being. And so that's the reason we came up with the $5 million ask for Steve Carter for this year. And we think that's a more appropriate and realistic ask.
Anyone else? Ms. Holloway?
Yes, thank you. I have three questions, Dr. Chasson, in regards to the 30 million and the school system completion rates and DIBELS. In regards to the school system completion rates, what happens to the systems that don't meet that deadline? Is there something in?
there is nothing in the law outlined as a repercussion of not meeting that deadline. We have been and will continue to outreach to those systems. I do expect we'll see some better completion rates from some of these systems soon. I'll point out like East Baton Rouge Parish is one of our, it's our second largest
Yeah,
system
you
in the
have
state,
14%
sitting at
there.
14.5% completion. Yeah, so I do expect this year we'll see an uptick. for that district in particular, which I know will help our overall state completion rate. But we will continue to, do outreach and support these systems with their completion throughout this year.
Will you have a follow-up next meeting on the same?
No, so
Outline.
this literacy report in our new calendar will come to you all every August. But I'm happy to provide to you all an update. The data collection for Act 108 is done in April and May of every school year. And that's ongoing in that legislation, that we will continue to collect completion rates and then report out to you all.
Yeah, it seems like a year from now would be quite lengthy.
Ms.
Without
Holloway,
knowing
one
who.
thing that we could do, though, is we could just, as a team, look at some of the systems that, like, for instance, EBR was mentioned there at 14%. You know, we have a couple of large systems that are there. What we can do is just follow up with you over the next couple of months and let you know where they are in terms of implementation. And we'll try to lean in a little more on those systems to move them towards compliance as well. And we're happy to just have conversations beyond today around
Yeah,
that.
I'd like the whole board member, all of us to know.
Well, I'll
in a
include that
few
in the
months.
update report
That'd
to
be
you.
fine.
Yeah, no problem.
Like at the end of May or so forth. The other question in regards to the 30 million, I don't recall the deadline of when they are to apply.
September 15th.
15. Can we get a list at the next meeting of who has not applied, which systems? Like, I would want to know. in
Yeah, I
my-
can certainly
district.
have that to you all after that date, any systems that did not apply by that date.
Perfect, thank you. And in regards to Dibbles, I have the same questions that Mr. Castile inquired about Dibbles, whether the screener versus an assessment is appropriate. I would like to know more about that, too.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk more with you, Ms. Holloway, about Dibbles and what it provides. You know, I think it is important to note that, Dibbles is, very different from our LEAP assessment that we give. Our LEAP assessment is it's more comprehensive. It is an ELA assessment. It is an English Language Arts assessment. It is more comprehensive. It's on how students read, comprehend, and write.
Are
Whereas
you referring
our-
to LEAP?
LEAP, yes. Dibbles is really about assessing the ability of a student to read fluently. And that is what it is, and that's what we need to know the most in those earliest grade levels.
I'm very familiar through experience. I don't have to go there, but through experience, even administering Dibbles, I'll have to upfront say the concern of a screener versus an assessment to determine a third grade failure. So I just want to leave it there, but we can talk later. Thank you.
Absolutely.
As a note to that, Ms. Holloway, just want to make sure we all appreciate and understand that is what was passed in law.
Oh,
So
I
that's not a
understand.
board policy.
I get it.
Yes, sir, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Chason, we know there's been a lot of hard work in this space, and we've made a lot of progress. So as much as we gain national attention for our progress, so I know the board really appreciates all the work and the recognition for the work and how our students have benefited from all this. So want to recognize that, first of all. Also want to recognize and appreciate Superintendent Brumley's opening comment about the format and the flexibility here to adjust the format with regard to the KPI stewardship going forward. I had several questions. I'm going to start out on page 29 of the 4 pillars that are identified here. The first one is about school literacy outcomes will increase when schools create and monitor literacy goals. So to Mr. Appel's point and your acknowledgement, the example is given for EBR at 14.5%, and we're past the deadline. So it's not clear to me that the school systems are getting this information. So I would request that LDOE come back to this board at our next meeting with a recommendation for how we can better get this information to the school boards so that they are aware of this information and they can respond in a timely manner going forward to benefit our students for these funds that are available and aren't being implemented in a timely manner.
Mr. Morris, question on that. Whenever you say, just so we understand moving forward what you're asking for, like there is no doubt in my mind that the school systems know about Act 108. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that the leaders of the school systems know about that. When you say school boards, I just want to make sure you're referencing the actual board members.
Yeah,
Is that what you're talking?
I'm referencing the board members.
Okay, got it.
Second comment is also on the same page, page 29. The fourth pillar reference to families playing an essential role in literacy development of children at all ages and stages. There was a reference to, on your last page of your handout, to family engagement, but I didn't see anything in the KPI stewardship specific to family engagement. So I don't really have any appreciation for how we're measuring family engagement. I know, my understanding is that this board approved $1 million to the literacy
Center for Learning and Literacy.
center, right, to address the family engagement component. So I haven't gotten any feedback on that, and I'd like to get an update on that. Next question is on page 30. Senator Appel spoke to the 50% target in 2028 and the goal of 1% improvement per year over 5 years to get there. So my question is similar to his. What do we think is the maximum potential here? We are talking about proficiency, right? And it's across the board. It's not just reading. It's the LEAP test, as you articulated. But I don't know what the real capacity is here, you know, for proficiency. Do we have some reference for where the bar should be set for that? For example, if I think 75% is the right number, I'm just throwing a number out there. I don't know what it is. But if that's the number and it's 1% per year, it's going to take us 25 years to get there at a 1% increment. So I'd like to get some feedback on what we think the ultimate goal is. And if we're only going 1% per year, I'd like to know if that's the appropriate or the recommended ramp rate for our goal. Next one, I appreciate the concept of the key performance indicator and the new term that's being used now, key endeavors. But I don't really see any indicators for the key endeavors. So, for example, I really appreciate the level of detail with the tool, the level of resolution to identify where interventions are appropriate or not. But I haven't seen any indicators to help me appreciate how many indicators were identified and then how many interventions were actually implemented following the recommendations in the tool. So it's super cool if you have a great tool, but I don't have any indication of the use of the tool. So I would be looking for some sort of indicators here, some sort of metrics to help us to appreciate how much of the tool is actually being utilized to benefit students. My next question is, we've identified a lot of progress here. We've identified a lot of different tools, some innovative approaches, but I don't really have a clear indication of what's working. So I've heard a lot of good feedback about Amira. I've witnessed the implementation of Ignite, seen several other innovative approaches, but I don't have anything to help me appreciate which one of these are working, which ones are working really well, where have these been rolled out across the state. Are we getting this information to fourth quartile performers so they can appreciate, hey, this is working in other parts of the state, we don't have that resource yet, how do we get that resource? So I'm looking for some detail next time, and I'm going to say I'd like for something prior to next year to help us to appreciate how we identify what's working well, and where it's working, so that we can share that information to fourth quartile performers. My next question is on page 32. Senator Appel spoke to it, and you spoke to it as well. If we look at kindergarten and first grade, then we can obviously see the significant growth there in a school year. I heard a lot of commentary about the impact of COVID, and COVID has slowed down different cohorts and whatnot. So for me, that would help explain the baseline, where we start. but it doesn't explain the growth within a school year. So what we're looking at here, the bar charts that are indicated on top of page 32, to me, that's an indicator of the growth in a school year. So I appreciate that the baseline for second graders is close to the baseline for first graders, given the cohort differential and the COVID impact. But for me, it doesn't explain the lack of growth in a school year. So I don't know what's missing there, but I'd like to understand some explanation for the lack of growth. I understand the baseline, but I don't understand the lack of growth.
So, Mr. Morris, I'll jump in there. I do think that was, partly I was trying to explain on the next slide where we talked about those benchmark cut scores. And so when you see that stagnation in second and third, what you're seeing when I talked about that piece of Swiss cheese with the holes and student deficits, our second and third graders have more deficits. They come in that way in second and third grade, but then it's harder to grow them in second and third grade content. And so just keeping them, I would posit that just keeping them on this level, keeping that same amount on a second grade level, beginning of second grade to end of second grade level, is growing students. And so I just wanted to, that next slide where you look at what's required of students to be considered on grade level and above at the beginning of the year to what's required at the end of year. And so it doesn't come out clearly on that slide when you look at our second and third grade data, but the next slide really, helps to paint that picture that still is growth to keep kids proficient, where I'll be honest, I think years ago, prior to the work and the focus around the science of reading and our empowerment of teachers with those knowledge and skills, I don't know that we would have seen second and third graders even remain at that level. I think we would have seen a drop in the second and third grade of the number of students reading on grade level and above. So staying there is showing progress. We are not satisfied with that. We absolutely want to see more and want to see that greater uptick like we do in kindergarten and first grade. But imagining that these students in second and third grade are entering with so many gaps in learning and their deficits grow over time. Between kindergarten and second grade, when we talk about decoding and decoding words, breaking down words, it is a code to learn how to read, and they have breaks in the code, like those very specific things I was talking about with that student. And so when they have breaks in the code, it's one thing to have one break or two breaks when they're in kinder and first. When they get to second and third, they have dozens. And so it's even harder to move them. It's harder to keep them on level, and then it's even harder to move them from one level to the next.
Okay, that helps, and I appreciate that on the bottom of page, the chart there, that there is a significant increase in the number of words for second and third graders, so I get that too. But bottom line is, we would expect next year that we wouldn't be flatlining in second grade.
I would, because those first graders that we see here are already entering at a higher level, and then I would expect to see more uptick in that second grade for next year.
Okay, thank you. I think I had one more comment. No, my last comment was just to recognize Rapides Parish for their 100% completion rate. I don't see him here today, but Superintendent Powell invited me to their start of school celebration, so I wanted to thank him for that and also compliment them and the others on the 100% completion rate. So thank you again, Dr. Chason.
Quick question. I do honestly want to say as a school leader that we received the emails, and I'm a high school, and I received the emails on the different tests and reminding us to make sure our teachers are compliant. So as far as the information getting out to schools, I can honestly say I can forward all that information to you. It comes out in a newsletter. It comes out daily. It comes out sometimes 3 times if you have other people on the emails. If the school isn't getting to it, I know for a fact that it's not about the lack of communication. Even with the high dosage tutoring, the information, that information is out. Recently, it was stated that charter schools can also become vendors of the tutoring. So that information does get out. I think it's sometimes just things that goes on in the schools and the districts. My question too is about what AdLink, when we're with the eScholar, when we're uploading teachers, which is now on a daily basis, and I'm looking at the percentages, what are the outliers to the percentages that are listed? Because even if you have a teacher that's listed as a third grade teacher because that's the certification area, but there is no attendance or an enrollment associated with that teacher in AdLink, that teacher can still be counted as a teacher of a third grade or K through third class, but that teacher will not necessarily take that test or go through that training because they're not teaching a class. They could be doing other things for push-in and other stuff in the school. So I guess my question is making sure that when we look at these completion rates and we're getting consistent data, so it's very accurate, so it's actually happening in schools, how do we make sure we eliminate the outliers who are listed in EdLink but are not actually teachers of record that would not take that training?
Yeah, the collection is not as sophisticated as you described. We asked schools to decrease the burden on the amount of information that they have to give to us. They're not giving it to us at a teacher level. They're giving us, this school has
Right.
this many teachers in grades K through 3 and this many administrators, and this is how many finished it. So we're asking for a numerator and a denominator. So they're telling us.
And they may
that
not be
number.
teachers of record of
That's
K
right.
through 3.
So they're
we probably need
self-reporting
to
on
find a new
both.
collection method.
Yeah.
Because this is, when I look at the amount of teachers, and I asked some of the teachers in some of the districts I represent, this is 1/3 of our teachers, and those are not teachers of record. So I think we need to find another data collection method so that we look better and it's more consistent.
One quick request, unrelated to anything, but can you all develop a quantity of schools that offer a pre-K program? Do we have data on how many schools might offer a pre-K? Because I understand it's voluntary, but
We do. We have that data
I'd just like to see
that
it.
we can share.
Thank you. Okay, we have a couple of folks wishing to speak, Keith Corville and Tommy Byler. Would y'all come on down? Please introduce yourself and go ahead.
Tommy Byler, Superintendent of Vermilion Parish School System. I just want to, I'm listening to some of the questions, understand that the people in the two-year plan, like we are showing 49%, well, we're at 93%. They asked for reporting in April. We didn't finish until May. We're in the second year. So there may be some nerves about that some of the programs aren't there and the systems aren't doing it. Most of us took the entire year through PDs and whatever. So I would not be as concerned that you have the lower percentage, especially for the two-year groups. We started that 2 years ago. It was just a timing mechanism. So I don't want people to think, well, you're not going to finish till next April. 93% of our folks are done. And to your point, Mr. Mark, I don't want to come up here and only talk when I have questions and concerns and don't agree. The literacy program is working. I will sit up there and the work that Dr. Chasson and them's office have turned in, and with the Dibble screener and all of that, we're seeing the growth. And I don't know, unless you live it day to day, if you truly know the impact that COVID had on kindergarten and first grade. Because if you can't see somebody's mouth moving, you're not going to be able to learn the science of reading. And so I'm not concerned at all, and we are very high achieving in literacy, and we've seen growth with the programs we have. So kudos to Dr. Schatz on that group for implementing it. So I am sitting up here saying, good job by the department. So I'm not here to talk on Thomas today. So
We're going to frame that.
appreciate that.
Very rare.
No, I appreciate that, but don't, the numbers I think are skewed a little bit for the two-year program. So we are on target.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, Mr. Corville.
Matt, before I want to respond to that, I want to talk bad about Tommy before. No, I'm good. Yeah, Tommy's a good dude. One of the things on the balance here, just so the board is aware, we ask school systems to report, various information from time to time. We've tried to reduce like surveys asking for information. I mean, we could get this report every month if we asked them, but just keep in mind that we also try to limit the amount of things that we're asking them to report back out to us. So we hear what you say about reporting. We'll continue to think about more sophisticated methods of data collection. We just want everyone to also understand the sensitivity of they're also trying to have school. So just want to make sure everyone appreciates that.
Yes, sir.
Greetings, everyone. Dr. Keith Corville, Executive Director of the Associated Professional Educators of Louisiana. I wanted to come up here and, being a little bit experienced in this literacy work with the department, wanted to come up here and spread some joy this morning and compliments I can't stay the whole day, so I'm trying to get all my joy to you in early. But that being said, at a time where I was reflecting upon this, where nationally students are reading less and less, and also along the backdrop of decades of efforts in Louisiana before this administration, where reading scores were stagnant. And here we have a significant increase in our students' ability to read. I cannot speak enough praise for State Superintendent Dr. Cade Brumley and Dr. Jenna Chassall and their leadership and their literacy team on the significance of what they have done and what they have improved in our state and the lives of children and families that they have impacted. And I will say this too, I think that comes from two things. It comes from their strong knowledge and academic background that allows them to impact both classrooms and schools, and it comes from their strong policy work. When you saw that presentation by Dr. Jenna Chassall, it showed not only what they were doing academically and teaching teachers, but the policies, whether it's accelerating in tutoring or policies on diagnostics for students, that what they were doing was combining that academic knowledge and that policy to have a long-lasting impact. And I want to make this prediction to y'all too. In maybe 1, 2, or 3 years, you're going to see Dr. Jenna Chassall at this table today, and she's going to be talking to you about really great results that they're going to have upcoming in numeracy, because they're doing that work and the lessons they've learned, they're applying it to numeracy, and it's already looking phenomenal. And I also want to just put this out here too before I finish, is that especially for those of you who are new on Bessie, since now I think I'm on my 4th department administration through the tenure of my career outside the classroom, for those of you who are new on Bessie, and for those of you who are still on here, I feel like the best thing you can do is support Dr. Brumley, State Superintendent Dr. Cade Brumley, in his policy work and his recommendations. Whether it's from this afternoon's work on letting teachers teach or the work surrounding literacy or numeracy. The bottom line is that I feel like we have the best Department of Education in the nation. We're making amazing strides. It's Louisiana. We were behind the pack, and now we're leading. And y'all, the support that you can give will impact. It will go from supporting the department and its leadership. It will go back to the classroom. So I appreciate y'all's support, y'all's tireless efforts, and I just want to encourage everyone to keep working together so well between Bessie and the department, and keep supporting each other, keep encouraged, and keep up this good, hard work day in and day out. God bless y'all. Y'all have a wonderful day.
Thank you, sir. Now, how much did he pay him? That's the question. So, no. Okay, we have a motion on the table. Are there any objections to the motion? Hearing no objections, the motion carries. Next item.
Your next item is on page 59, item 5.1, consideration of the membership of the Early Childhood Care and Education Commission. The recommendation is to approve.
Do we have, Mr. Castillo makes a motion. Mr. Harris seconds. Do we have any objection? Any comments? No objection, the motion carries.
Your next item is on page 76, item 6.1, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 135, Health and Safety, in response to legislation of the 2024 regular legislative session. The recommendation is to approve, as a notice of intent, revisions to Bulletin 135.
Mr. Castillo moves and Mr. Harris seconds. Any objection to the motion or any comments? No comments. I appreciate all the motions you guys are making. Hearing no objection, the motion carries.
Your next item is on page 82, item 6.2, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook for School Administrators, regarding LEAP 2025 test scores. Recommendation is to approve, as a notice of intent, revisions to Bulletin 741.
Ms. Holloway moves and that was just to make sure everybody was awake. So, Ms. Holloway moves and Mr. Harris seconds. Any
2024 regular legislative session regarding numeracy and high-dosage tutoring. The recommendation is to approve, as a notice of intent, revisions to Bulletin 1566.
Mr. Birkin moves and Dr. Armstrong seconds. Any comments, any questions? Any objection to the motion? No objections, the motion carries.
Your next item is on page 88. Item 6.4, consideration of revisions to bulletins in response to legislation of the 2024 regular legislative session. The recommendation is to approve as notices of intent revisions to bulletins 741 and 741 non-public.
Okay, let's see, who we have? Who'd you say? Well, you're both waving hands. Dr. Clark moves. And Mr. Holloway, Ms. Holloway seconds. All those in favor? No objections? Motion carries. Everybody's waving down here.
Your next item is on page 97. Item 6.5, consideration of revisions to bulletins in response to special education legislation of the 2024 regular legislative session and recommendations from the Louisiana Legislative Auditors. The recommendation is to approve as notices of intent revisions to bulletins 741, 1573, 1706, and 1922.
Okay, Dr. Armstrong moves, Mr. Birkin seconds. Any discussion or comments? Any objection to the, is this for this? Okay, I'm so sorry.
Mr.
We do have-
Appel, as we go into this item, just want to highlight for the board that we worked with one of the state legislators on a bit of an omnibus bill around some of the improvements that we wanted to make in the special education space that we felt like were important. That bill moved through the process, ultimately was signed into law. So what you have here is some of the technical work for rule promulgation as a result of that legislation that we're thankful we were able to pass. And then also you see some adjustments to policy based on the legislative auditors' work, where they have worked with us on both dispute resolution and monitoring efforts. So these are changes to policy as a result of that process.
Thank you, sir. We do have one person wishing to speak, Jackie Pierce, if you want to come on down. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Jackie Pierce.
Just hold the mic close to your mouth.
Make sure it's on.
Yeah, make sure it switches on,
There
too.
you go.
Now it's on.
Yeah.
So my name's Jackie Pierce. I live in Lafourche Parish, and I have two items that I'd like to speak on. Number one is cameras in the classroom. It's my understanding that the funding's there for it. I don't think that there should be any kind of requisition process to get these cameras into special education classrooms. There are some schools that are unfamiliar with the process to begin with, and I think that there needs to be some clarity with that. The other topic that I'd like to speak on is the special education training of the school board members. While I understand that it's very important, they are the decision makers that are in each of the school districts, I think it's important to consider that special education starts with the child. And there are many school board members who don't visit schools. There are many school board members who haven't been in a classroom setting in years, if at all. I believe having sat through and participated in several special education meetings in many capacities as a parent, as a special education teacher, as a regular education teacher, and as an advocate, we need to get some training closer to those children. We have ODRs who, a lot of them don't attend meetings, sadly. We have many who don't participate in meetings, and their only understanding is that they have to sign that sheet of paper on that ODR line on an IEP. And it's not everywhere, but it is an issue that is coming up in the school systems that we're experiencing. So I do believe that special education should be, everyone who touches the child should be trained in special education to help reinforce that compliance with everything, all the laws and rights that are involved in special education.
Thank you. I have heard a lot of inquiries about the camera issue, and so I'd like to ask the department, could they update us on this camera stuff?
Yeah, so we actually provide a report, I think once a year, on the status of the cameras in the classroom, but the way in which the legislation was crafted originally was that a parent has to request the camera, and then it would be installed into the classrooms. Now, some school systems across the state went ahead And they provided the cameras for all their classrooms even before an ASP. And some of them are handling it should an ASP be made. In the first year, there was an appropriation of $8 million, and we came up with a formula in which we understood how many special education classrooms were in the state, by school, by district, and that's the basis for that number. And it included installation cost as well as the actual cameras and equipment. For, I believe, 2 consecutive years now, we have asked for 10% of that initial $8 million for ongoing maintenance needs that school systems may have, so that they don't feel like, okay, we just received the money one time, we have no money to keep them up. So those requests have been in the amount of $800,000 annually, I believe, over the last 2 years. And so we will continue to provide to the board a report on, you know, the implementation of the cameras in the classroom, as well as funding that is available for that.
Okay, and that would be a public report, so parents would be able to see it and so forth and so on. And it sounds like, one more last quick point, it sounds like the issue really resides in the appropriations process more than anything else. Is that a fair statement? In other words, over at the legislature?
Well, I can speak on, there is a specific school that is telling parents that it would be a privacy issue to put a camera in a classroom, that they have cameras in the hallways.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I guess we've got to look into that one. Thank you. Sure, appreciate it. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Ms. Holloway?
I want to follow up on this, Dr. Brumley, in regards to cameras in the classroom. And from what we understand with the law, it's self-contained, SPED classes, right? And you've allotted a certain amount of dollars for these schools. Is there a timeline of when they should implement or set up these cameras?
I may have to get our finance team to answer that, but the funds essentially go into their account, and they have those funds available for use. One of the issues that we did hear was that on occasion, there would be a school system that would take an extraordinary amount of time to implement, to install the camera in the classroom. And so that's why one of the reasons with this new policy, we have the 90-day rule. So it has to be installed within 90 days of the parent making the ask.
So the parent has to make the ask for the camera to be in the classroom.
That's right, because that's what's in the...
And I think that's what's happening. They're not understanding. They're assuming that the system should have these cameras in the classroom, and it's not happening.
Yeah. So the way in which the law reads is that the parent has to make the request for the camera in the classroom. But again, some school systems have just said, look, we're just going to go ahead and install them in all the classrooms ahead of that. So that's the way that's working.
So it's up to the system of
Well,
how things are
It
installed.
is, except for legally, they have to now do that within 90 days if a parent makes a request.
Okay.
Well, I think we also have the other point of the privacy issue that apparently the school district or the school is telling the parents. So perhaps we need to get a legal opinion, either from Bessie's legal, I'm looking at her, or LDOE's, and determine something that could be spread to the school districts as far as the legalities, federal and state, dealing with privacy, so that it could alleviate such comments if they're not true. And it may be true, I don't know. But
Yeah.
I think I'd request that from the attorneys.
And not only that, do all SPED parents in a self-contained class are aware of this law and their rights? It seems like if we're having questions and people are asking, I don't know how to solve that. Dr. Brumley, that's, okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Let's see, we have a motion, but I forgot who made it.
Ms. Armstrong? Dr.
Armstrong.
Armstrong? Mr.
And
Burke.
is there any objections to the motion? Hearing none, the motion passes.
All right, that concludes your agenda.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you all, and I'm sorry for the loud crashing sound, but that was just to keep everybody alive. Do we have something else?